Friday afternoon, Friday just before Shabbat, just a davening at the Kotel. So whereas in LA, you just gotta, you gotta squeeze the olive.
Mm-hmm. Also in Israel, it seems much more schismatic. That, like, you're identified very much by the kippah you wear, the uniform you wear, and people kind of break down into very compact groups. While in Los Angeles and in America, you can blend through many different worlds, like you do. You'll talk to a Reform rabbi for lunch and an Orthodox rabbi for dinner, and a secularist and a right winger, but in Israel, people seem to stick very much to their own compact group.
It's true. It's true. It's a very small space. I mean, we were separated for 2,000 years, and then after 2,000 years of being scattered around the world, we just meet up in this tiny neighborhood called Israel. Mm-hmm. It's a miracle we don't kill each other. Mm-hmm. So I think one of the coping mechanisms is to sort of circle the wagons for your own group.
Yeah.
Whereas we just don't have that same problem here. That's why pluralism is so much more accepted here in America. Yeah. It's one of the things we can export to Israel that they can use from America. In fact, that's one of the advantages of exile. That's why Chief Rabbi Sachs doesn't go one way or the other. Mm-hmm. He doesn't set up, he doesn't pick Israel over exile. He says they're both valuable. There's things in exile that can help Israel and vice versa. In fact, there's a humility to being in exile that I sort of like. I don't have the cockiness here that I have when I'm in Israel.
Yeah.
There's no cockiness. Keeps you humble.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for that. So, Chaim Seidler Fellow talks a lot about the value of exile.
Yeah.
In Zionism itself, that the Zionism can learn and embrace and include the spirit of exile in its definition. And exile represents a lot of valuable traits, Jewish traits, and one of them is humility.
Kind of what David Hartman's trying to do with the Hartman Institute in Israel, right? Is bringing some of that diaspora notion of pluralism.
Absolutely, yeah. He's a special. I was with him exactly a year ago. They have the program right now as we speak. I was supposed to be there.
Wow.
Yeah. They're doing exactly that. They're trying to bring pluralism, but it's difficult. A lot of times these organizations, we hear about them more in America than you hear them in Israel. Mm-hmm. So they're struggling.
Yeah, David Hartman is like a favorite with New York Times journalists, but he has very little influence over actual Israelis.
David who?
David Hartman, Rabbi Hartman, is a favorite of New York Times journalists and the Western press. They all love to go interview Rabbi Hartman, but he has no influence over Israelis.
It's a tougher world out there. It's a tougher nut to crack. I mean, even just the Haredi monopoly of the chief rabbinate there is a good example. It's a tough place to make things happen. The conservative movement has a lot of difficulties over there, and the reform movement, and even homegrown rabbis. It's a very, very difficult world to influence.
One thing I really like about this week's Parsha is that the Torah takes accidental death, accidental killing much more seriously than we do. In America, someone accidentally kills someone, and they get off scot-free most of the time, or maybe they serve a few months in jail. It's not a big deal. People commit DUIs and kill people, and they serve 2-3 years in prison. In the Torah perspective, you accidentally kill someone, you better run for your life, and you have to dwell in a particular city of refuge till the high priest dies. That may be 60 years. Death, killing, even accidental killing, is a very serious matter in a Torah perspective as opposed to the Western world.
It's true, and even the fact that when, if you notice, when God talks about the new land, the first thing they talk about is these cities of refuge, these sort of jails. Mm-hmm. It's almost a recognition of human weakness, of reality. Mm-hmm. So instead of fantasizing and creating this sort of fake oasis that you would see on a TV show right now, and dreaming that everything's going to be hunky-dory, Judaism recognizes up front, we're going to screw up, we're going to have criminals, and we're going to need to find a place for our criminals. And the first thing they talk about is the creating jails for criminals. That tells you something, doesn't it?
Yeah, like Lindsay Lohan committed 2 DUIs. She missed her scheduled court appearances 7 times. And only after doing all that is she finally sentenced to a few days in jail.
Right.
She had 2 DUIs, all these court appearances, like finally getting a little punishment. You know, the Torah believes in punishment. The Torah is not just, oh, let's just talk about rehabilitation. No, the Torah believes in punishment and rehabilitation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It doesn't have this, what I regard as a naive view of life, that, or the idea that punishment or vengeance is bad. The Torah believes in vengeance, and the Torah believes in punishment.
Vengeance? Too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you do wrong, and God gets angry, and
Right.
and there's
But
payback.
it's more justice, I think. I think that's one of the examples of sort of the evolution of Judaism, is it's more justice than vengeance right now. You know, vengeance is frowned upon right now.
Well, I think
It's a biblical idea.
yeah, it's frowned upon in our society, but all punishment contains an element of vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I do something bad to me and you shun me, there's an element of vengeance in there.
When you look at some of this sort of the nasty stuff of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
how do you deal with it, you personally? Because I know you're such a strong believer.
It doesn't drive me crazy, because I see the world as a dog-eat-dog world. I kind of see the world like a safari in Africa, where the zebra's limping, you know, the lion is going to eat it. Like, that's the world that we have. If you're weak, the strong are going to eat you. That I think that's the natural condition. And as with Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we had to wipe out 2 cities to end World War II. We had to bomb German cities into submission. And I believe very much in, corporeal punishment. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but if you live in a community where there is much evil going on, you are likely going to get caught up in the punishment that comes to that evil. Mm-hmm. So you either have to clean up your community, or you need to leave, or you're going to reap the whirlwind. Mm-hmm. So I think that's how the real world is. So Iran right now is manufacturing nuclear weapons. If Israel or the United States bombs Iran and innocent, quote-unquote, Iranian civilians are killed in the raids, well, that's the consequence of allowing evil people to control and run your society. Mm-hmm. Most of Germans were not Nazis, but they still acquiesced to the Nazis taking control of their country and using it for evil means. Therefore, all Germans, even those who weren't Nazis, are naturally going to reap the whirlwind. And so too with the Canaanites, they reached such a level of evil, of sacrificing their children just as a routine ritual, just like the Palestinians sacrificed their children, mm-hmm. Trying to blow up Israelis. Mm-hmm. Like, these are very evil societies, and I think the Torah's attitude is hardball. Sometimes you have to kill evil people, and sometimes you just have to expel them from the land.
So there is an aspect to sort of the biblical narrative, sort of the difficult, extreme, radical biblical narrative. That component of it.
I respect
that applies to today. Mm-hmm. I think especially when you deal with sort of more geopolitical dimensions of evil, mm-hmm. where you're dealing with somebody who might threaten the lives of 6 to 20 million people. But how about on the interpersonal level? Are there different rules? If you see evil on a sort of on a community level, one-to-one person, between husband and wife, between friends, between children and parent, because there's also this other extremely ethical component to Judaism that's a lot more compassionate. How do you reconcile these two? Because one of them is so unforgiving, the one you relate to. Right. Don't you relate to the other one as well?
Well, I relate to the other one, and if the Torah commanded us to keep on committing genocide over the generations, I'd have a lot of problem with that. I would not relate to that. The Torah and the system, the legal system that developed from it, circumscribes the times when you put people to death. It's basically just for murder, that you were to put someone to death, and not even for all murder. So then the way husbands and